so let's talk about my top 8 tips to help you dominate at PvP and Hunt Showdown. Maybe you're at the point where you feel like you can't win fights or are struggling to get on a winning streak. Well, this is the video for you. My goal is to help you become a more well-rounded and knowledgeable player to excel in PvP fights. If you like this video and want to see more content like this, be sure to like and subscribe. Anyways, let's get into my top 8 PvP tips. The first tip is to be more aggressive. Push when the enemy is at a disadvantage, reviving, healing, or reloading. But when these happen are out of your control. We want to talk about artificially creating the disadvantage for your enemy. Certain items you can use for a tactical push are flash bombs and decoy fuses. These can be absolutely devastating if used properly in close quarters fights. With decoy fuses, it will force people to reposition. A good strategy to use with the decoy fuse is to try to get the enemy to fall back and peek right, while you peek left. In case you are unaware, you always want to peek left. Since the way Hunt has their first-person perspective set up, peeking left will always conceal your character more than peeking right. Another tool regarding being more aggressive is to use choke bombs as an offensive item rather than defensive. Throwing a choke will act as a sound barrier that will mask movement sounds, or causing the enemy to cough and their aim will be all over the place. Another strategy regarding aggression with explosives, which I haven't seen anyone talk about, is to throw explosives when your enemy is cooking their explosive. 9 times out of 10, they won't hear you cooking yours. Taking this a step further, oftentimes I will throw 2 explosives back to back. People run away from their initial position when you start the cooking process, but will return to their initial spot after the first explosive has landed. Throwing the first explosive will mask the sound of you getting ready to throw again. And just like that, you get a kill. This tip is useful in limited scenarios, but this strategy has worked for me many times. Wallbanging is very underutilized as a PvP strategy. I see a lot of people be super conservative with taking shots, only shooting when the enemy is within clear line of sight. Now, I would advise against just shooting blindly into walls hoping for a kill. The best course of action is to listen and try to understand where they are located inside the building. For me, what works best is to visualize the interior of the building and its layout, and then try to use the sound of hunters to get the wallbang. Learning the compounds and common spots people like to hang out inside boss layers will help tremendously. In general, wallbangs take a long time to master, so just practice and I promise you'll see results. To become a better PvP player, you need to understand the enemy and try to predict their movements and decisions before they even make them. Factors to take into consideration are things like, what loadout do they have? How long have they been engaging a team? Do they have traps? Has anyone been downed? You should be asking yourself questions like these, and it should give you some idea of how to handle the situation. Certain loadouts cater to certain playstyles. Shotgun players typically tend to hold angles for much longer than any normal person would. People with rifles or scopes often will want to rotate or fall back before re-engaging. People with traps will be more agile, likely wanting you to run into their trapped barrels. The basics of this tip is to just be consciously thinking about things from the perspective of the enemy. Honestly, just make it a game trying to predict what a team will do next. You will learn a lot about player behavior and it'll put you in a better mindset to make solid decisions in PvP fights. The most successful teams in Hunt will have great coordination and communication in fights. Being as descriptive as possible and pinging your callouts will keep your whole team focused and understanding the situation better. I'm sure you have all had a teammate that just starts shooting and doesn't say anything, while you are trying to figure out what the hell is going on. Basically, don't keep anything to yourself. If you think you hear somebody, call it out. In regard to team play, I notice some people frequently will leave their partners down for an extended period of time. I think you should try your best to go for revives early, and put in maximum effort into reviving your down teammates. The morale of your team is something to take into account always. Making someone spectate for 20 minutes while you are holding an angle or too scared to push is just not the way to handle yourself in the bayou. Use necro or use explosives, decoys, or a flash to buy time to get the revive. I always say getting the revive early is like getting a life insurance policy for yourself. Sure, you could try to clutch and go against the last few guys while your team is down, but with the way trades have been, you will likely trade with the last hunter, and just like that, you're sent back to the lobby. go for the revive. Start paying attention to angles and peak spots more. Either go into free roam and look, or use the downtime when banishing a boss to look for angles. Knowing a lot of different spots in each compound could one day get you a kill. Learning compounds fully often takes thousands of hours. Think about it, every match you might only run through a handful of compounds, only to end up dying or extracting. I think this is pretty common for newer players to not explore or try to look for angles actively. In order to get an advantage over players, you need to learn the compounds in more depth than the typical hunter. With that in mind, you should definitely check out my compound guides. I go over a lot of peeking angles, vaulting spots, and general tips for specific compounds. Don't peek the same spot twice. Pretty basic tip, but honestly I see a lot of people get fixated in a fight and will get way too comfortable in one area. The longer you linger in an area, the higher the chances of a team rotating and flanking you. Not to mention that once your position is known, there could just be someone holding an angle on you, which is a recipe for instant death. You are putting yourself at an extreme disadvantage if you stay in one spot for too long. Repositioning is very undervalued in Hunt. In order to be successful in fights, you want to always keep your enemy guessing where you will be peeking from next. The more you do this, the more likely you will see the other team make a mistake with their positioning. The more mobile you are, the higher the chances of the enemy misjudging your location, putting you at the advantage. Also, it's worth bringing up again to always consider how you can position yourself to peek left and put the enemy in a right peek situation. This next one is my top tip I always give to new players if they ask for advice. Simply put, engaging in fights and dying is more valuable than getting one kill and extracting. Very often I see newer players camp or be very timid in terms of engaging with other hunters. Trust me, I get it. When I first started Hunt, everything was scary and intense. But my advice is if you truly want to improve at PvP fast, I strongly suggest getting into more fights. Even if that results in you dying more. It is way more valuable to get into a match, fight a team or two and die, rather than not engage at all with anyone. You are going to make mistakes. Just accept that death is inevitable and is a good opportunity to look back on mistakes and what you could have done differently in shootouts. If people are camping or not engaging or have trapped themselves in the boss lair, just leave the match and get into another game. Unless you enjoy the time commitment of a 30-minute fight with nothing happening, it is more valuable to just get into another match and get into some fights, especially if you want to improve at PvP. So those were some of my tips to become a better PvP player. I am planning on doing more videos covering PvP, so be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss it. Hope you enjoyed this video, thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next one.